Hello. Welcome to VUX World, where I'm kind of on my own. Well, not on my own. I'm with Frank. Hello, Frank.
What's going on, Kane?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. But in terms of hosting, I'm on my own today. Justin can't make this one. Justin's having a baby soon, and he has had a scan rearranged for today. So flying solo in the hosting seat. But I am absolutely over the moon to be joined by CEO of Speakeasy AI, Frank Schneider, who is joining us for the second time, returning. So welcome back, Frank.
I am so privileged and honored to be invited back for a second time. I can't even tell you. Although there was no rap intro, so the bars changed a little bit. You
That's
didn't
true.
hit some bars for me, but it was still. I'm still happy to be here. Thank you.
That is very true. So for those who, and I did that on purpose because it's a reason for people to go back and check the first episode. So Frank is based in Philadelphia, and on the first episode that we had Frank on the podcast, I did a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air rap introducing Frank to the show. And I think probably to this day it's still the best intro we've ever had on VUX World. So definitely check out that first episode. Yeah,
What I especially appreciated about that was that you didn't tell me you were going to do it, so it was just
exactly.
sprung on me. So my reaction was natural, and when I think back to it, I'm kind of like, all right, here we go again. I'm excited to see what you have in store today. Not to not to sort of put you under pressure.
Yeah. Well,
Was,
yeah. Funny you should say that because I have prepared.
yeah.
Joking, I'm joking. But welcome everyone. For who's joining us on LinkedIn? There's a few people on here now. 21 or so people joining in straight away. So welcome to VUX World. If it's your first time joining us, listening to the show, this is the show where we dive into the details on conversational AI strategy, design, and development with the aim of either teaching you how to do it or helping you find ROI with it. And Frank and Speakeasy have got a whole wealth of experience, and we're going to be talking today about the how to go about automating your call centers using artificial intelligence, conversational AI, and we're going to get moving. Before we do kick off, I'd like to give a shout out to Bradley Metrock and his team from Project Voice Catalyst. If you are in the industry, if you're working in the industry, in the conversational AI voice industry, Bradley Metrock, who is the founder of Score Publishing, they run the Project Voice conference. They do This Week in Voice, the podcast. If you haven't listened to that yet, then do so. And Project Voice Catalyst is an opportunity for you if you work in the industry, if you have technology, if you have services, and you're looking to find clients. Project Voice Catalyst are offering 5 warm leads per month if you get involved in their business development services. So do check it out. It's a little bit kind of like exclusive right now for VUX World listeners because there's no website. It's a little bit like a virtual speakeasy, actually, Frank, to be honest. But to get involved, just email ray@scorepublishing.us. That's RAY at scorepublishing.us. So, Frank, here we are. And before we do kick off, we were supposed to meet in Philadelphia in January to
Yes.
go for a Philly cheesesteak. So we definitely need to rearrange that at some point once this whole COVID thing's over with.
Absolutely. Well, we'll go on a sandwich tour, not just a cheesesteak, because Philly is sandwiches in the world.
Wicked. Well, so thank you everyone for tuning in. And if you have any questions throughout the whole course of this show, just stick them in the comments on LinkedIn, and we'll do our very best to put them to Frank. It's always better with a bit of audience participation, so do chip in with your comments and your questions for Frank. So Frank, before we kick off, then, before we get into the details of automating call centers with conversational AI, do you want to just give us a bit of an introduction to yourself and a little bit of an introduction to Speakeasy and let everyone know who you are and what you're up to in this kind of space?
Sure. So, me personally, it's funny. It's always Philly heavy with me. It's just the nature of someone that's born and raised in that city. But started my career as a teacher, was in education in the nonprofit world, segued into technology sales, and then have had the quite sort of wonderful, fortunate experience to be able to work in and around call centers, which people in that industry know it is. It's a fun place to work. Um, it's an environment where you always have an opportunity to work on new technologies. Automation and AI really has a lot of DNA in some of these sort of legacy telco or contact center technologies. So I've been in software for going on 15 years. My prior company before Speakeasy AI was a digital chatbot company that we exited. And during that time, we had the privilege of consulting with some really large brands, JP Morgan Chase, Time Warner Cable, Verizon Wireless, Intercontinental Hotels Group, among others. And we got to meet some amazing people who were on the forefront of automation technologies. So we launched Speakeasy about 2 years ago, based on some of the hypotheses that we had from those learnings from our prior company, as well as some ingenuity and incredible ideas from our CTO and my co-founder, Moshe Viezan. And then we got out into marketplace. So we've been around for 2 years. We're a sort of startup on the rise. And what we ultimately do is try to provide voice customer experiences that people can use and love. And we try to automate conversations, not just in voice, but in digital, and walk that call or walk that chat over to the call center agent, sit with them in the cubicle, and then provide assistance from that point forward. But that's us in a nutshell.
Cool. So you're right that, the voice technology and conversational technology has a long history in IVR. And I remember, I don't remember because I wasn't involved in this space then, but some people might remember that around like the 90s and stuff with Nuance and companies like that were providing a lot of technology in the IVR space. It almost seems as though, and we've had this conversation a few times, it almost seems as though the IVR space, the call center space, having a bit of a renaissance as far as voice technology is concerned. And
Sure.
would you say that's true? And if it is, why do you think that is?
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're definitely trying to be a part of that. And so there is an agenda in it for us, but we do believe this market condition exists. So the one really easy one is that everyone has an Alexa in their kitchen, or has a Siri on their phone, or talks to things again. And there's this market condition that people are willing to talk to voice automation things again. And the expectation has changed drastically. And the patience level for Alexa is a little bit different too. Like, people don't get frustrated and angry with Alexa because they don't usually have a problem, but it opens a gateway from an adoption perspective if people are willing to talk to automated things again. And then at the same time, digital AI investments that have had varying degrees of success, if we're being honest, over the past sort of 5 to 10 years, have gotten to the point where, you might be handling, like, I know brands that are doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 million chatbot conversations through their website or contact us a year, yet their phone volume has not really decreased at the level that they anticipated. Digital was supposed to reduce call volume. And it's not that they don't want customers to call them. It's the sort of longstanding issue of how do you handle that kind of scale 24 hours a day in voice. So you have a potential adoption curve readiness for customers to talk to things again. You have digital AI investments that have done well in digital platforms or typing to it platforms that are now ready to be brought back into some of the laggard technologies that are the original voice automation technologies, that being IVR. So it's sort of this perfect storm of forces. And what we've tried to do is consult and build around a product or a platform that's really betting on that AI orchestration layer of saying, hey, we're going to be really good at understanding intent. We're going to be really good at understanding what the customer needs and wants. And then fulfillment for us doesn't have to be just from us natively. Fulfillment can be from existing IVR automation that already works well. Like, no one's going to do payments in IVR better. You can make payments in IVR now. You have for a while, and they're not that cumbersome, to be honest. But some of these informational or complex conversational flows, we're going to bring those in. And where we can have a conversation, we will. But if there's a dialogue flow digital bot that you've invested in that can have a conversation, let's go over there and do fulfillment there. Or if fulfillment is a human and we need to deliver to call to Kane and then help Kane be as efficient as possible, we're going to go there for fulfillment. And all the while, we want to track analytics that make sense from a customer journey perspective so we can improve things over time. So that's sort of the landscape as we see it. But those market forces of talking to things again, combined with investments over the last 5 to 10 years in enterprises, and the need to stick all these things together and have them work in sometimes even a laggard piece of technology like IVR, is what we're seeing.
Mm. And has the kind of, I think you're right in terms of the consumer appetite. People, speaking to the devices all day long and stuff like that, maybe makes it more likely that someone's gonna not just trying to hang up or whatever when they hear a bot through an IVR. But is there anything that's changed as far as the technology is concerned? I mean, the technology from the 90s and early 2000s, was that good enough to automate most IVRs? You mentioned that some of the payment journeys are fine. What's changed in terms of the technology over the last, let's say, decade?
Sure. The expansion of what you can do with natural language to recognize intent and then fulfill those intents with AI or automation has expanded drastically. So what you can now do self-service with has changed dynamically, so that you're not just doing those traditional, like in a cable environment. Cable company, you can always call and check on an outage, or when is a technician arriving once you authenticate. But now you can ask questions related to the actual set-top box itself, or walk down a more complex troubleshooting. There's some sort of nuts and bolts troubleshooting, but some more nuanced versions of that, or informational content, or quality content, like you're calling a hotel and you want to know some things specifically about a property. So, in the IVR world, for as long as you can imagine, right, containment has been the driving force. And even that word, containing, like, how do we keep customers in? And containment as a success metric has just been something that has driven some of these issues of why people hate IVRs. And the idea that even in containment in IVRs, if you hang up, well, you were contained. Well, you might have hung up out of frustration. How was that success? But we didn't continue. We continue. You didn't get to an agent. So because technology is better now and we can deliver this, but because of those sins of the past, if you will, there's always going to be the person still calling and saying agent, 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 or get me to a human. And we feel like the crux of it is you might need to accept that there's going to be 10 to maybe 20% of people who are just never going to play with your automation, your voice IVR, and that's okay. So just, tell me what you need to talk to us about. We're going to get you to the right human, and then we'll help that human service you. But to force people down a flow where hanging up is a good thing is not where you want to go. But technology now can have us sort of change that calculus. So as you build confidence and deliver self-service in some unique ways in automation, then we believe that adoption curve will change. And we're seeing that with the customers that we're deployed with.
So it sounds as though, from what you're saying, it sounds as though, like, in the past, some of the IVR systems have been able to automate some of the kind of big ticket, fairly or more straightforward kind of use cases, like make a payment, are you open, etc. But it sounds as though
I wouldn't say most. I would say there's like a top 10 list that
right. Okay.
It's not necessarily the top drivers. There's just things that IVRs can do. Right.
Okay. But what you're saying is that the technology has advanced to the point whereby you can now realistically start targeting some of those longer tail queries, so that rather than automating, like, I don't know, 30% of the top 10, you're now able to then essentially automate a hell of a lot more, because the technology is more sophisticated, that you can understand a lot more about what people are saying.
Absolutely. And that's the key. Understanding the true intent of the customer beyond just the behavior patterns within an IVR that you programmed guessing, or you programmed to just track dropout rates. For us, when we consult and we deploy, we often say, let's listen to your customer for 2 weeks or whatever the case may be, for a certain period of time before we get them to an agent, and actually give you real-time analytics into what those voices are asking for on their way to their journey to the agent. And then you actually have your roadmap prescriptively before you even deploy a self-service flow. You kind of don't know what you don't know. You have some hypotheses, and a lot of them are formulated to be true, because you're tracking these things in digital customer behavior as well as sort of agent side, QA, QM. But ultimately, we believe in, let's listen to your customers and have them help drive this roadmap rather than force them down a flow. IVR is linear automation. It's not meant to be conversational. Even the I is interactive. It never promised intelligence, and it hasn't delivered intelligence. And it's just, you're either going to zero out to an agent, you're going to do the flows that we built in this very linear, boxed in path, and that's it. And if you think about sort of when you call an IVR now, especially now, they try to contain you so many times, and they try to discourage you from even being on the phone. Hey, listen, just to let you know, the hold times are crazy. So if you still want to talk to us, we'll get you to an agent. Then you might hear a ring and it goes to the next prompt. Hey, disclaimer, we're going to record you, and the whole time is 15 minutes, but still, do you want to talk? If you do, tell us some things, right? If it's natural language, or here are some of the things that you might want to talk about. You might want to talk about billing. You might want to talk about making a payment. You might want to talk about an outage. Anything else? Can you just go to our website? So they keep discouraging you at every moment, which kind of doesn't open up the door for why you came in to begin with. And no one does that in a human retail environment. If you walk into a Sprint store, they don't say, before you come in, did you go to the website? And if you come in, just know, I only want to do these 3 things. And if you want to do those 3 things, great, we're going to sit down. Oh, and by the way, you're probably going to have to wait 20 minutes for me to come back to you and talk to you again. So let me go in the back. If it's about these 3 things, otherwise get out and go to the website. And technology now has made it so that kind of world and automation is just something we need to avoid for customers.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, there's that saying within agile kind of software development, isn't there, that you have to appreciate that everyone did the best they could at the time, given the knowledge they had, the skills they had, and the resources at their disposal. And it seems a little bit as though history and historically, people have just kind of like, I mean, some IVR systems have been in play for like 20 years. And over the course of those 20 years, it's like, well, okay, well, let's just stick this in there. Let's stick that in there. Let's put this hold music in. Let's stick another cue over here. And it's like, over the time, it just ends up like a big spaghetti. And it does end up becoming what it should be is helpful. It should be giving people an opportunity to get whatever it is that they need to get, whether it's because they couldn't find it on the website or whether it's because they chose not to use the website. But it's almost as if over time, IVRs have stopped becoming what they should be, which is helpful, and started becoming a little bit of a negative experience. And most people do complain about the press 1 for this and press 2 for that. And it's like, it actually takes forever as well. It was one of the advantages of being able to just have someone speak to the phone, understand what it is that they are calling about, is that you totally shorten that call time. You don't have to press 1, then wait, and then press 2, then wait, and then press, it's just, it's shortening the call time, providing a better experience, and using IVRs for what they should be used for, which is to help people.
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny, and it's not brands' faults. I don't think any of this is done with ill will towards customers or with intent. I think about at a past company, I consulted with a giant cable company that their customer service was so ill thought of out in the world at times that there was a Saturday Night Live skit about their customer service, literally, where they kind of teased it out, made fun of it. There was, they hired a celebrity coach of an American sport here in the States to be their IVR voice, which blew up in another weird, kind of funny, unintentionally comedic way. And they had one of these famous issues where it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago, where a call center agent had a bad experience with a customer, and then they sent them a bill with like a new name for them in their bill to kind of teach them a lesson, a colorful name. And all of these things were going on. And this brand said, it's all, forget the technology silos and how we're limited with things. We need to really lean into customer experience, because this is not going to be tenable for us long term. And so they hired a bunch of really smart people who were very focused on the customer and not the barriers of technology limitations, and sort of took some calculated risks and tried some new things. And this brand had probably the best team I've ever run across in my life, as far as what they were able to do with chatbots back in 2014, what they were able to do with live chat back in 2011, maybe. All of these which were newer channels back then at scale, they were doing incredible things. Their mobile app was amazing. And it all bore out of the sort of, let's actually authentically say, it's not just about the tech stack, it's about the customer experience, and lean into the customer journey.
Cool. We've got quite a bit of a discussion going on over in LinkedIn, and I'm going to come around to that in just 1 minute.
Oh, yeah.
But before that, you were getting at, we were kind of getting into, you kind of started hinting at some of the practicalities about how you might go about doing this kind of automation. And you mentioned that you start out with listening. And it was interesting. We were having a conversation the other day on LinkedIn, and we were talking about, how do you go about figuring out what to automate? How do you go about starting? So it was a conversation about, I want to find the chap's name, because at least I need to give credit where credit is due. Cool. Is it Martin Butterfield, I want to say? Anyway, I'll find it. But yeah, we were talking about, how do you go about starting? Wayne Butterfield. Wayne Butterfield. I hope he's tuning in. So Wayne was asking about, how do you go about starting out? Like, how do you know what use cases to aim for? How do you know, like, what to even do? What conversations to automate? What use cases you should prioritize? And so it's interesting, because you're talking about this listening exercise. I'm wondering whether we can just elaborate on what that actually looks like. So correct me if I'm wrong, and you can elaborate on this, but you implement the speakeasy technology within the IVR system and you just listen to what people are calling about and then match that to an intent and then prioritize it that way. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good brushstroke to paint it. I mean, for us, our DNA is sort of AI orchestration and integration, because what we learned working at these big companies is there were so many different siloed investments across the whole spectrum of digital and voice that to ignore them all and sweep it all out would just not work. So what that means from a sort of delivery perspective for us is, and I'll be really granular. So you might have an enterprise IVR that you invested in the big names like Avaya or Genesys or Cisco. And it's just not feasible for you to sweep that out necessarily based on staff you have on hand, based on your capital expenditure, based on all of these different features. And there are parts of it you might even like, right? And it also has to do with how much labor you're sourcing and from what provider. So for whatever reason, you want that IVR, but you just want it to work better. At the same time, you have all of these digital investments, these digital properties that sit on your website, that sit in your mobile app. They're doing automation and that are doing conversational automation now. And these things need to sort of work together and have consistency of approach and consistency of content, and also incorporate what's going on the agent side. So for us, we're trying to enable all that. So when we come in with our solution, we say we're going to integrate with your Genesys IVR, for example. And hey, do you have any AI content that we can use? Great. We have pre-built bot connectors to certain bots. So Watson, Dialogflow, Inventa, Creative Virtual, NanoRep/LogMe, and Alexa, or Amazon Lex, which are two different things. So, depending on what you have, let's bring all that into the mix. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to fulfill the answers. We're not going to answer. We're not going to disrupt the customer experience. And before we get them to an agent, we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to do a couple of things. One is we're building a Bootstrap text model for custom language models with those bot integrators, or with a corpus.
1 second.
Yeah.
Before we carry on, a bootstrapped language model, you said.
Yeah.
So do you want to just define what that means, just in case there's people tuning in who might not be quite as savvy with the terminology? So
there's an inherent sort of issue that's not compared to what we're trying to solve between speech to text and speech to intent, which is what we use. And we're not trying to say that speech to intent is more accurate, but for handling 50 million conversations at scale in voice and trying to improve things quickly and dynamically and report on things in real time, which not a lot of people do the AI reporting in real time very well and reacting to it in real time very well, which we're trying to do. We don't just rely on text alone to understand. So traditional AI systems or voice AI systems are, you speak the words, we transcribe it, and then we push it to the system of intelligence. We want to pre-digest things. So we're saying our AI engine, as well as our sort of machine learning neural net for voice, audio, and phonetic pattern matching, as well as when I say bootstrap model, it's the text that we used as the foundation layer. That text could come from your existing bot deployments. It could come from some sort of human created intents. We're going to mix all of this together into one sort of embodiment to listen to that call. Because why should we listen to that call and not leverage all the context that's possible? And then as we do that, and I say it's a bootstrap model because once the text foundation is built, we're now going to layer audio on top of that. And over time, you're going to have a robust, truly voice-centered model. This is for our IVR deployment because we do digital as well, to handle these customer inquiries. And that's how we can have a conversation that's pretty complex. And I can say, hey, I'm traveling next Thursday and I'm bringing my mom, and I'm saying it in this very Philly accent. And, she likes to bring water on the plane. And I know that's not allowed, but really what I want to ask is, do I have to pay anything extra to sit next to her? And I said water on purpose. I tried to get there because that's that accent. And we're able to marry that to an intent. And the reason why we're able to marry that into intent is because we're aware of the context of all the other investments you have. We have a really best of breed engine to understand what that intent is. And ultimately, we also don't rely on transcription alone. It's not that transcription isn't accurate. I mean, at this point, to sell speech to text, to be in that marketplace, I mean, Microsoft declared human parity like 2 years ago. They said it's 95% accurate. I've never pressed the microphone button on any phone and spoken into it and been like, oh, that transcription was horrible. It's usually fairly accurate, right? We're not trying to say speech to text is faulty. We're saying it's one piece of a puzzle to really understand the customer. And that's a difference for our approach. So we listen, we build out this intent library in the original model. We're giving you real-time analytics into what's going on. And then oftentimes the customer finds out, wow, even before I get to self-service, I need to change a lot of my routing. I need to reduce call transfer rates. Holy smokes, look at all this insight I'm getting into call drivers. And I know someone had a comment on LinkedIn that, listen, contact centers are sitting on immense data. Some of the smartest data analysts that I've ever met in my life work in contact centers. I mean, it's like, Goodwill Hunting doing call center metrics. It's crazy. So they have plenty of data, but this is new and actionable and timely. The speed of it is really important. So being able to provide that in real time is key. So we build a model, we show you what prescriptively you should attack, and then we decide how to attack it, because it might not be all automation. The goal is not just how much can we automate, even though we want to, right? And we will, but maybe a lot of these are human issues, but we're going to make the agent more efficient. And that's why we have Agent Assist in our portfolio as well. Or maybe this is going to inform digital strategy for another product. Maybe it's going to inform the way we're handling search. It's actually going to be business perspective insights into this voice.
So for those who are tuning in who might not be kind of as close to this kind of stuff, is correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure I understand this. Is that no. I think most people are following, and I'm following. I just want to make sure that I'm getting it, so that in case I'm not. So what you're saying is that you put the speakeasy technology into the IVR system, and it doesn't matter what the IVR system is. Is that correct? It doesn't matter if it's Genesis, Avaya, any IVR system that exists today.
And I'm kind of answering that easily, and that's a huge value prop for people. People are kind of like, wow, that's heavy lifting a lot of times. Because think about the gambit. We talked about IVR being around 20, 30 years. The flavors of IVRs, or what license you've bought, or what you've paid for, or what you've accepted or not accepted, even within a Cisco world, the flavors of Cisco IVR are varied and deep. And we've done really good at, I don't want to be too jargony about how we do it or give away secret sauce. We've done really well at the heavy lifting to be able to leverage that and get on the line and listen.
So regardless of which IVR system you have, because I think that's also the first step in many people's minds in terms of, if you're thinking about automating your IVR, the first step is, well, I've got this Genesis system, and it's we don't really want to get rid of it because it costs us a hell of a lot of money, got a lot invested in it. So I think one of the first barriers is, well, people might not necessarily be aware that they can do a lot with what they already have. And so regardless of the IVR system that you have, the speakeasy technology then can sit there, not taking control, in the early stages, we're talking about that listening phase. The technology sits there without taking control, without trying to automate anything. It just sits there and listens to what people are talking about. And rather than the kind of speech to text which you mentioned, which for those tuning in, sometimes or the way the dialogue flow on Google and etc. work is that they'll take your speech, they'll translate it into text, and then the natural language processing will then try and figure out what you actually want to do, and then you get that kind of intent at the back end. But so you're listening using different technology that's not reliant on speech to text, and then figuring out whether, depending on what people are saying, should I send them to this bot that I've already have, like a bot that you might have on your website? You can plug that into your IVR, maybe route something there. Or you are ultimately you may even just route everything back to an agent, but what you get as a result is a whole load of data around what the intent is, which means that then you can then say, okay, out of the last 6,000 calls over the last few days, this is the top 50 intents. Then you're in a position to say, okay, well, which of these can we automate? Where can we get the automation from?
And where can we automate? Should we build things in Speakeasy? Should we build, because we're very good at building conversation flows. Should we build a conversation flow in Speakeasy that has certain slots or actions to do? Or ultimately, but when we get down this part of the flow, even within a flow, maybe there's a script that calls this bot who's the subject matter expert in that information, and we voice enable that bot. For us, we want to be the authority of intent and sort of orchestrate where and how fulfillment happens. And fulfillment in AI is sort of, okay, I know what you want, now I'm going to go get it. Fulfillment could be human fulfillment, and then we're going to augment that human. It could be any one of your other automation ecosystems. It could be an RPA flow you built in UiPath, and we're going to voice enable that. But for us, we want to empower sort of diverse fulfillment perspectives or diverse fulfillment to break down these silos and have one place where you can go to manage the orchestration, manage these different investments, and manage the customer journey, because the customer doesn't care about these words that we're using at all. They just want what they want. and they want what they need. And so we need to give you that vision in real time and actually allow you to sort of plug and play and have insights and then react to them.
That's cool. So I want people to visualize this. If you're tuning in and you are even working close to a contact center, this is the picture I have in my mind. And from what you're saying, this is the way that I have in my mind. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
But imagine having some glue that basically sticks together the chatbot on your website, possibly even your Alexa skill, the IVR call center system that you have, sits in the middle of the whole thing. And whenever someone calls up to your company, whatever they say, it then either can just fulfill it directly. If someone phones up and says, hey, look, if they phone up a restaurant and say, hey, are you open tomorrow? Fulfill that directly and just say, yes, tomorrow we're open at XYZ. Automate that call. But let's say they're talking about returns. Phone a retailer, hey, I bought a package the other day, I want to return it. And let's say the chatbot on the website currently does that interaction. Then you would just pull that chatbot into the call.
Yep.
So then they handle the return part of the flow within the call.
Yep.
Is that correct? That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Why people struggle with that is because, and it's an approach differentiation, not to give too much of a way of what makes us special, but we want to digest it before we call the chatbot. We're bringing AI to the line earlier. We're not just passing the transcription along, because different bots need to have the information presented to them in different ways. And so we're good at speaking bot, if you will. Our layer, that conversational middleware that you described, is making sure that wherever we go, even if it's just article content, we know how to go fetch it. So that way it doesn't have a break point by just passing transcription along. And that way you can have those more complex things, because ultimately, especially in the voice channel, again, we do digital as well. But in the voice channel, it's a little more challenging because people speak differently than they type. It's just the nature of things. And then ultimately, human fulfillment is not something that we want to punish the customer for. If they have to get to a human, we want to take them there, and we want to stay in the mix, because it's going to help our models get better. It's going to help us understand how to better serve this customer. It's going to help drive efficiency, reduce training times and average handle times for the agents. And all of that goodness should be shared. It shouldn't be siloed and isolated.
So that example I was given there then, because this is another interesting thing, is I think that sometimes when you're thinking about automating your conversations within your contact center, it's quite easy to think, well, I'm a large pensions company, I'm a large insurance company, or I'm a massive bank. And it's like, I don't think that many of our things can be automated because they're so specific. We've got really specific customers with really specific needs. And so 20 or 80% of our calls are going to end up with a live agent. But from hearing you talk, and this would be interesting for you to get into that bit, is that even when that happens, when you say the technology follows the caller through from the IVR to actually speaking to a live agent, so Speakeasy will sit there, listen to that call. And then last time we spoke, you were talking about the fact that even when you transfer a caller to an agent, the agent's on the call, Speakeasy can then actually help the agent fulfill that call as well. Do you want to explain a little bit about what happened, how that works, and how that looks?
Sure. So we, in our voice agent assist, since this is a voice centric sort of conversation, we're listening to the customer. And then in an agent desktop UI, oftentimes integrated in an agent desktop UI, we don't want to, again, we want to be integrated. We want to be seamless. We don't want to plug in another thing they have to look at besides the article contents or the post-it notes on the right-hand side. And we're listening to the customer.
And the 10 systems that they have to use as well.
Right, exactly. So for example, we can do this in a Zendesk window or in a Genesis agent UI window. And so as it's going on, we say, hey, here is the answer that Sky, that's what we call our own voice bot. Here's the answer that Sky would have answered with. If you want to use it, that can help you. And then maybe here's the top 3 by confidence score in our algorithm, other things that might have answered this. So the agent has the right to go quickly, it's quick, but it changes right there. And then we're tracking the agent interacting with it as well. So the human agent is acting like an AI annotator, if you will, and improving the system and not really disrupting anything. So we're having that conversation. We're helping the agent. The agent can hit the pause button, turn us off for a moment. Maybe we're listening to too much. Maybe someone's describing all of their, I have 3 daughters, and maybe, and I can be a little bit verbose. So maybe I'm just describing all my 3 kids before I book a hotel room and why they need certain beds. And maybe you want to pause that for a moment because we don't want to analyze all of that. And then unpause it when you're ready. We don't want to be an intrusive sort of, or, obstruction to the agent providing seamless care and quickly. And then in the digital world, we're trying to drive concurrency, let the agent handle multiple chats at a time. But ultimately, then at the end of that conversation, we're going to automate some wrap-up notes or help disposition the call, as they say in the contact center. Why did the customer call? Here are the intents that were touched. And that way they can get to the next call a little bit more quickly and feel a little bit more empowered to get things done. But all of that information, all that data is feeding back into the same AI engine that can do self-service. There's no reason to keep these things siloed anymore. And that's what we're trying to enable. These things have to talk to each other.
And that's half of the problem that I've seen in contact centers is that agents, when they're answering calls, they've got so many calls to get through. And in reality, I've seen contact centers where they don't actually kind of wrap up the call at the end. So they won't actually record what the call was about because they're just too busy. They need to get on to the next call. And so, having them while they're on the call give you the feedback to tell you how the agent, like for example, I'm on the call, I'm on the phone with a customer. Sky's recommending me answers, and I can say, yeah, that one, I need that one. Feed that into the system, train the AI. Doesn't require any more time on my part. Michael Novak, shout out to Michael. We met also in Project Voice. My first time ever in America in January, freaking 30 odd years, and I didn't even go to America before. But Michael's asking, I'm gonna come on to some of these LinkedIn comments now because there's a good discussion going on. There's loads of comments in here and quite a few questions. What Michael's asking is, when agents do that, when agents give Sky feedback or update things and give update answers and stuff, is all that stuff updated in real time so that 5 minutes later when the next agent gets on a call and Sky's there, Sky uses the intelligence that she's just got, or it's just got from one call and can feed it straight into the next call? Is that real time updating or?
It's tracked in real time, but you typically in a deployment don't want to update the knowledge base in real time. You want to have some kind of quality control to sort of look at it. But we have a neural net machine learning system that we call Nerve. And in Nerve, you see it automatically. And we even have a dashboard view where you can say, let me just see agent behavior and not customer behavior. I want to segment customer journeys by how the agent is interacting with the bot that's listening to calls. So often all the data is presented in real time and the suggestions are presented in real time. But typically, we think it's a best practice to not update the knowledge base based on that feedback right away. We can prioritize it or have alerts sent out. Maybe it's something that's clearly an issue that you want flagged. We can do things like that, and customers have asked us to do that. But we don't sort of change the knowledge base in real time a lot of times, and especially if that knowledge is actually being fulfilled somewhere else, right? So let's say, for example, we're partners with a company, and we're going to announce here in a couple of weeks that sort of does a version of expert answer sourcing. They find fans and brand advocates and influencers out in the world who know a lot about specific products, right? And they are a great source to get information. So we're going to integrate with them. And then at times for the agent, it might be that the best, based on that intent, the best piece of content to help this customer comes from a fan of this product. Okay. And, I'm going to use Nike as, I even have a Nike sticker on my laptop. Nike's not the use case, but I'm a huge Nike fan. If you want to ask me about the Air Jordan 11 and all the colors it comes in and all the different ways it feels on court, off court, what looks good with jeans, at least in my opinion, right? And I'm old, so I'm not that good at fashion. But but if you want to talk about the Air Jordan 11, maybe you grab me, and that's the piece of content. So if the agent felt like it didn't work as well as he expected or she expected, then changing that would be really, there's going to be a little bit of a tail or a lag on that, right? Because that content actually exists in the third-party fulfillment place that we brought to the table. So maybe that was too much of a
it's right. It's right. And also the other thing is that you don't want an agent who's on the call distracted, typing away, trying to update a knowledge base with spelling mistakes and all kinds of stuff going on. It's just, it's not going to be.
We keep it to clicks, just a couple little clicks. And we don't even make, so it's hard to conceptualize, but in the UI of Sky for the agent assist, the agent answer comes in green. And if the agent were to pick one of the two intents below to change the answer above, it seamlessly changes in the same box.
Okay.
So it isn't a new box, doesn't look like a new utterance. It changes within the box.
Okay.
And really, it's all just to try to make it easy and something the agents actually want to use. And it's funny, my first job was paperboy, but my second job was a call center agent. And if you are given a tool, and you don't think it's actually helping you, you put it aside unless someone beats you over the head to use it. And we want this to be something the agents want to use.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump into LinkedIn. So Gopi has asked, how do you approach automatic call distribution? So I've come across a case study recently from Charles Schwab, and apparently, how true this is, but apparently Charles Schwab no longer has a switchboard, like a first point of contact that will then route your call through to wherever it needs to go, and all of that's handled by an AI. Is that something that you've had any experience with, and how does that work?
Yeah, so it's funny, and I used to sell IVRs and ACDs in the cloud, right, a long time ago, and consulted with brands about that. And we're at the point where, because we work in such big brands, we're often having to work with their existing IVR and ACD, right? But if it's a brand that actually is in a sweep out position, or you know what, we don't care, we just want to eliminate that, or they don't want to hang on, they're not pleased. And it's funny, I should say, a lot of brands are relatively pleased enough with certain IVRs, so they're not ready to swap it out, or they have a good relationship with the vendor, which matters. But in that instance, what do we do about ACD? You know, we see ACD as just plumbing, and if you want us to bring the plumbing to have this renovated bathroom, then we're just going to bring the plumbing. We'll bring some PVC. So for us, we'll bring the ACD. We'll just license sort of an off-the-shelf ACD or IVR, like a free switch or something like that. And then that'll help us get to the routing of your telephony so that we can exist in the top layer and do AI routing and sort of replace the ACD. So we can do that. It's just a matter of, do you want us to do the plumbing or not? Most people don't want us to do the plumbing. I think that'll change over time because there's so much plumbing investment already there that they want us to sort of renovate on top of the plumbing, to use the analogy.
And Michael again has said it's not a question, it's more of a comment, but he's saying that he appreciates sometimes the kind of I'll call you back kind of notion. I think the problem with that though is that it stops people from getting what they want to get done, and then it has something hanging on you that you then need to do again that different when you're ready, most of the time you really don't want to phone people. I've spent a lot of time working in government, and one of the first things you learn when you very first test a government service is that people don't want to use any government websites. They're not doing it because they want to, they're doing it because they have to renew the passport, otherwise they can't go on holiday. They have to get a parking permit, otherwise they can't park outside the house. So they're not doing it out of choice, they're doing it because they want to. And I think that sometimes when people call, it's almost like that. It's like, I don't want to phone my insurer, but I have to. And so when you get there, I don't really want them to say, well, hi, I'll tell you what, we'll phone you back in half an hour. It's like, I'm ready to do it now, So that's half of the value as well, is that you can actually deliver things there and then.
We believe it should be part of your arsenal, but much like other automation investments or other virtual queuing or whatever you want to call it, it has to be used in the right way. So we actually are a firm believer in callback technologies, but what we would want to do is take a stab at self-service or collecting intent information before you schedule that. So a lot of times these virtual callbacks will present you with just a menu. They confirm the phone number. Oh, well, are you calling at this number? Yes, I am. Okay, can you do Tuesday at 2? Or can you do later on today? Can you do 3 hours from now? And if it's no, they present the next menu, and it's like another IVR. So what we would say is, in principle, we think that virtual callback is really good, especially there are issues. Again, our tenet is there are issues that a human has to handle. So this is a human issue, and just by the nature of the world, a human isn't always available. But this is a human issue. So we know you'll be best served by a human. Tell us what you need before we have that human call you back. So now let's bring some, again, and that's where our power is. We would say let's natural language enable that little flow. Maybe you get some data, so you reduce the time of when they get to the agent. Does the agent already know what they want? Does the agent already have the answer ready, or the workflow up to walk them down that workflow? Or maybe when you collect what the customer says, hey, I use the open example. I know it's so easy, but let's just use it again. Are you open on Thanksgiving? Oh, well, why am I going to schedule a callback for that? And again, this is a really rudimentary example, but why am I going to schedule a callback for that when I can just answer it? Actually, we are. Boom, it's over. Do you still want the callback? No, I don't. Oh, thanks. Have a great day. So it's just a little nuanced difference, but we actually, at a high level, would say, have it in your arsenal. Have virtual callback in your arsenal, because there will be times you're just trying to solve that issue. A human is required and a human is not available. And rather than frustrate them or torture them, some customers like the virtual callback. And it's funny, I know that for me, I like it when it's something where I already know it's going to be a whole time, like if I have to call the government. or I have to call the IRS about a tax refund or something. Well, shoot, I don't expect to get through to a human forever. So if you tell me I'll call you back, great. Yeah, call me back 2:00. I'm good. I'll pick up the phone when you call, because it's a different expectation. So, maybe you want a technician to specifically walk you through booting up a complex piece of technology, and you want a human. There's a digital self-service, but you're in a technological world where you just want someone to walk you through it. Well, there might not be a human available to do that. So schedule a time to do it.
There's also those really kind of unique little things where, like, so for example, I had a situation with GoDaddy where what happened was I was using a Microsoft email, and just as a byproduct of having a Microsoft email, you get a Microsoft calendar, right? But I didn't use my Microsoft Calendar. I used Google Calendar because all the docs on Google, everything's on Google, right? So half of the stuff's in Microsoft, half the stuff's in Google. But then what was happening was, depending on what device I was checking my emails and accepting calendar invites on, some invites would go to my Microsoft email, and some invites would go to my Google email, calendar rather. So what was happening is sometimes I was missing calls because the calendar invite was in my Microsoft calendar, and I always check my Google Calendar. And so what I went through the process of moving from Microsoft to G Suite, and I wanted to kind of, basically I needed GoDaddy to help it, and all I wanted to do was switch the, I don't know, whatever host it was or something daft like that, and it wasn't working, right? Just wasn't working. Followed all the guidance, followed all the tutorials, did everything, just wasn't working. And I ended up having to phone GoDaddy, and if there had been an agent there, I'd have just been able to say I want to switch from Microsoft to Google. It might have just took me to the stuff that I've just kind of done. Turns out there was some kind of cock up. They couldn't actually find how to do it on their end. It took them a day or so to get back to me. So it was really specific, really long tail. They're not going to get many calls like that in an average day. It was just something weird had gone on with when I'd migrated my emails, So for stuff like that, I can see it being useful.
And there's nothing wrong with asynchronous care, right? That's why text messaging is so popular in customer care now. There's nothing wrong with asynchronous care when it's appropriate. But you shouldn't try to force customers to engage in a way that they don't want, or continually discourage them from engaging the way that they prefer, right? So, know that, the whole time's forever. Just go to the website and figure it out. Knowing even some communication around, listen, we're going to handle this, but we're not quite sure. In that instance, we'll get back to you in a day. And can we text you? Well, that's transformative, because not everything is easy and informational or quick, but over time, if the AI is done right, going back to sort of the original theme of what we're talking about, all of these automations that roadmap can grow over time.
Peter Benston has asked, they'd be interested in hearing about how privacy concerns are being addressed in Speakeasy, and within the contact center automation space in general, but specifically for health and life science applications. Presumably that's where Peter's working. So what's your experience of privacy concerns from a user perspective, from a potential client perspective, and how is Speakeasy handling it and dealing with it?
Varies so much based on use case, right? So it's a tough one to answer simply, but I'll try my best. So, if there's a PCI compliancy or GDPR or whatever acronym you feel like throwing out there to protect sensitive client data, there's masking technologies that we have, that a lot of people have, that you can use to mask the collection of the data. Sometimes the privacy concerns are around the storage and how you store them and where you store them and when you delete them. It's not often a blocker. It's just a matter of what's the use case, what's the sensitive data that your client collecting, and how are you going to change your storage? How are you going to change your demonstration? Or how are you going to change your masking based on that? So it's just a matter of sort of checking off those boxes. So it's never fun, but it's super reliant on, are you collecting credit card information? Or do you need to be compliant because this is about a sensitive patient issue? And to be honest, healthcare is always an interesting one, because how much do you really want to automate before you get to a human? It's very use case driven. Some people want to be sensitive about certain things. One of the things that kind of, I'll say annoyed me about my world, my AI compatriots, if you will, is as soon as COVID hit, everyone was just releasing COVID bots, and that's marketing tools. And I was just kind of like, there should, first of all ramifications around this aside, there should be sort of less versions of the truth, or less versions of what the CDC or what the WHO or whoever is recommending, right? let the scientists handle that. And it's not a marketing opportunity, but also it's a sensitive thing, and maybe we need to take a different approach. But that's a whole nother issue that's sort of related, but ultimately it's driven by use case. And it's just a matter of what are you masking? How are you storing? How are you deleting? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. On the kind of Alexa and Google side, there was a whole kind of hoo-ha about all this COVID stuff when COVID was around. So like a lot of third parties were just creating like skills that were like COVID news and stuff like that. And I put a video on LinkedIn actually the day or 2 days before Amazon took everything down, because we were testing them out. Me and Dustin were testing them out, and it was like one of them was telling us that there's only 3 cases in America, and at the time it was like New York was on fire and stuff. It was like crazy.
It wasn't good, in my opinion. It wasn't a good marketing event for the AI industry. And we avoided that. I will say that as far as real use cases and how that impacts things, we see people closing call centers down with 2,500 people, not because they want to let them go because of the economy, but because of restrictions. And how do we get agents to work from home? And can they do voice at home? Can they only do chat at home? And how are we going to spin them up quickly? Do we need to use a new labor partner? And how do we make sure that the training time is down? And this is where it's been good for Agent Assist to help sort of solve some of those issues. And also in our client deployments, we have 2 clients who they have a custom dashboard on intents about Corona or COVID. And, they just want to have insights into what are the trends that we're seeing as far as people talking about it within the IVR, which it does come up. We saw similar trends for when some of the protests were occurring sort of in the United States. So having voice AI that can actually nimbly give you information on real-time conditions that might affect your business. There's not a lot of people doing that out there. So those are the kinds of things that we want to do. And then ultimately it's a business decision what you want to do with it. It's not, let's just put out a COVID bot kind of thing.
And you were talking about masking there in terms of one of the things that can help from the privacy standpoint. What is masking? Are you talking about blocking out like PIN numbers and stuff like that? Yeah.
The AI recognizes that you're giving a series of digits or series of numbers, so we're just not even going to collect it. You know what? That might be a credit card. It might be a social security number. We're not going to collect that data for this particular use case, and we're just going to mask that it ever existed. So when you go back and look at that call, it just has like a bunch of X's or some kind of.
How do you deal with authentication in that sense then? Because presumably if someone calls and they need to get access to their account or whatever, and is Speakeasy where that integration will happen into those line of business systems to automate that stuff? And if it is, how do you handle the masking in that environment?
Yeah, so it's 2 different questions. So let's say we're very big on not reinventing the wheels. So we talked about sort of IVR applications that currently work, or things that you've built in your enterprise that currently work. So oftentimes we will integrate with authentication flows or authentication that already exists within the IVR. And we'll just reuse that when it's a time to authenticate. Or there will be a CTI, which is really just the front end connected to a back end CRM that knows the customer, and we'll do that same lookup, right? So through an API, we'll present that information and know who the customer is, right? That's different than authentication. It's more like identification. And then lastly, we have voice biometric partners. So if someone says, you know what, I want you to use voice biometric, we bring a voice biometric partner in, or we re-leverage their existing voice bio. So again, part of that orchestration, again, it's very dependent on use cases. We try to stay flexible. Voice bio is something we've always wondered, should we do that ourselves because it lends itself well, but we haven't opened that up yet because still our DNA is there are some things that we do really well that no one else can do in orchestrating these things. And oftentimes customers who have invested and dived into voice biometrics has a vendor and has a solution that they want us to use. And so we'll use that.
So Gopi again has asked if an agent is not available. This is interesting because I've been doing a lot of work and a lot of research lately on chatbots on websites, and a lot of companies use live chat, which I know often is part of like a unified communications bundle that might come with your contact center. And what happens is, if it's after 5 or before 9, the live chat's not available. It turns it into a form. I submitted a form thinking I was going to get put into a conversation, but it was at I think it was 6:30 yesterday morning. And so I just sent a contact form. That was it. It was gone. So what do you do in that situation where people are calling? They're calling about something that can't be handled by the AI. Gopi has mentioned in a RONA state, RONA, I don't know whether that's been defined. It hasn't been defined further down yet. But essentially, what happens in that situation? If the agents are not available, it's out of hours. It's a call that can't be automated through the AI. What's the best practice way of handling those kind of things?
It's funny, in some ways, it points to a virtual callback. So again, it depends on the use case and how you want to fulfill it. And I think it's customer journey dependent from a technology answer perspective. So the bot doesn't have an answer. You need a human, but the human's still not available. So we would say use the bot to schedule a callback and have as much information queued up as possible. Or what we see a lot of brands doing, what we can do with our technology is move it to SMS, because SMS is inherently asynchronous. So move it to SMS and say, hey, well, just want to let you know we have this. We're going to work on it and we'll get back to you right away. So something that acknowledges that this collect as much data as possible, acknowledge that someone will be getting to it, and then figure out what channel makes most sense from an asynchronous standpoint. Because live chat makes no sense asynchronously, but text message makes all the sense asynchronously. Because, like you said, live chat, your expectation is it's live, right? Inherently, here comes the person, and we're going to type back and forth to each other. If you get to the end of that and that person isn't there, we would recommend you channel switch them rather than have them fill out a form or sit forever. And filling out a form is just a channel switch in a way. So it's tough. It's a tough one because you're still forcing a customer to do something maybe they didn't originally intend to do, but you want to make it so that both the technology and the experience sort of embody that this needs to be an asynchronous conversation right now due to situations beyond our control.
Interesting. I wonder, for those listening who are, it sounds looking at looking at a lot of the comments, it sounds as though there's some people potentially who are familiar and or maybe even working within this kind of space, and for those that are working on the contact center side, though, like who have contact centers that they're trying to automate, from your experience, what do you think is the proportion of calls that could potentially be automated? And the reason why I ask is because if someone's calling after 5 and it's closed, it's like, well, they can't get to an agent. But if that's only 10% of the calls, because the rest can be automated, then that's cool. So like even out of hours, the percentage of calls that can be automated, in terms of like out of 100 calls, what do you reckon the percentage is in terms of where the likely automation is? I know Google have put some numbers out that's quite high, but from your experience, what do you reckon?
Are you asking me or are you asking the audience?
I'm asking you and the audience. That's a good shout. Yeah, I'll ask the audience. What numbers have you seen?
That's the great thing about a listening pilot. I mean, people that are marketing heavy, and I remember even in the chatbot world, let's say, hey, we're going to deflect, 40 to 60% of your calls. We're going to deflect 80% of your calls. I mean, if you deflect 60% of calls, you're toppling the global labor market. It's that transformative. I mean, I'm talking to brands that are doing 100 million voice calls a year. I mean, could you imagine deflecting, actually saying with credibility that you're going to deflect 80% of that volume? They can't even change their spend level to handle that forecast. We think realistically, again, remember when I talked about sort of that current, my hypothesis is that what we're seeing is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% of customers are never going to want to automate. They're just always going to want to talk to a human. So you're not going after them. So now that leaves you, let's say 85%. What we're seeing is that on the low end, 10 to 20% of calls, right? 10, 20 is a fair estimate. But again, you're going to learn when you deploy a technology like ours, and it's going to be a curve that goes in the direction that you want it to go, because the more people use it, the more interactions that you have, the more things you can automate. And we want to put the control in to pick off the right issues. Because when you're doing 100 million calls a year, if you actually provide 10% improvement on an existing IVR, and it's not containment, it's not where we're counting hangups as success, but it's actually solving customer issues, that 10% is transformative. But people that don't know this world, or haven't been in it long enough, like Google's never going to say, yeah, we're going to deflect 10% of your calls. But a practitioner is going to go, really? They're almost going to have a hard time believing that. I mean, we already have IVR automation. We already have containment. Our website has 100 million visitors. We only have 10 million calls this day. Look at all that we've contained with just the web page, right? Which is kind of faulty math, right? So when you actually can have insight into the call drivers in a true way and unlock those insights, present them quickly, expediency is always the key, and then build flows based on that, yes, you're going to see. So in that instance where a human isn't available, that curve is always getting better as far as what things we can automate. And especially because that's why we're also trying to break down those silos and leverage what you have laying around contextually to provide those answers.
And those kind of volumes that a lot of contact centers experience, it's like on the one hand, yeah, saving 10% is huge, and then you're able to almost like shave a little bit off to then create more time for those people that actually need help. Because at the moment, it's the same thing, working in government, which is like if you have no automation at all, then there is people who are quite willing and quite able to self-serve that have to go through and speak to an actual person, which takes time away from the people that need to speak to an actual person because their stuff can't be automated, and then their experience is poor because they're having to wait and all that kind of stuff.
And because we're connecting the dots to human side agent, your whole support intelligence is getting better. AI agnostic. Your delivery model for support is improving across the breadth of everything that you're doing.
Yeah,
that's what we want to do. So you continue to learn what else can we automate, what else can we automate, and what else are the customers willing to have us automate.
Yeah. And even those that can't be automated, you're still gathering that intent. You're still being able to provide the agent with enough information for them to reduce their call time. So rather than a call taking 5 minutes, because the first 2.5 minutes is me trying to figure out what your situation is,
Exactly.
You can gather that info, send it on, reduce those call times. And so
or you got to me, and I'm an expert in your new router that was installed, that you self-installed. You did a self-install kit, ironically, and still had to call us. I'm an expert in that router, and because I knew who you were, you got to me. I'm ready to talk to you about this router. I have the article pulled up. I'm ready to rock and roll, and I don't need to go, oh, you meant that router? I got to transfer you, right? That transfer costs time and money too, right? So sometimes even that is a win, right? You didn't automate that necessarily, but you got it to the right place at the right time with some automation helping that agent, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Wicked. I think the potential for this is absolutely huge, and it's like it feels as though what we've tried to do with VUX World, on the services side and the product on the media side, is to try and bring attention to areas of voice technology, conversational AI, which is really important but doesn't seem to be getting as much attention as it could do. So we did, last year we spent a lot of time talking about sonic branding, the importance of how you sound as a brand, because in these audio first channels, audio is all you have. And I think one of the biggest opportunities for every organization that has any inbound customer contact, 99% of them have a contact center. And the opportunities with using conversational AI to automate transactions and services through the contact center are absolutely unbelievable. And for technology like Speakeasy, being able to reuse what you've already got, reuse the bots that you've already got, reuse or keep the current IVR system that you already have, but then essentially extract more value out of your investments is absolutely, for me, I don't even work in contact. I don't run a contact center, and for me it's mind-blowing. It's unbelievable.
Cool.
So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you. The discussion's been wicked on LinkedIn. It's been absolutely going crazy. I can't even keep up. This is why we need Dustin. We need two of us here so that we can actually we can handle this. But
we can always do a part two. Maybe there's something that comes out of the feedback that we can do another one. And listen, I'd love to bring, because I get tired of hearing myself talk, someone who actually does this. I'd love to bring a practitioner. I'd love to bring not even necessarily a client of ours. I'm very lucky to know a lot of people who are in this space that can talk about, I actually had to do this, and here's the real use case. And not enough of that stuff is out there on these podcasts. It's usually vendors talking to analysts, we would love to bring up someone who's actually in it, and I just shut up and get out of the way, and we have them talk. So let's see if there's a topic in there. And see if that can be the next sort of follow on from this. That would be cool.
Let's do that. That sounds really good. That I think getting the voice of the end user in this scenario, people who are actually implementing this stuff in contact centers would be really, really useful. So yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Frank, for joining us. And for those that are tuning in, it does seem as though we've got some people who are working in this space. If they want to kind of get involved with Speakeasy, try Speakeasy out, or if there's any people from the contact center side that want to kind of give it a whirl, what's the best place for them to reach out to you and to try Speakeasy?
Yeah, well, I'm Frank at speakeasyai.com. Our marketing inbox is hello@speakeasyai.com. So it's pretty easy. And our website is speakeasyai.com. So you can find us any of those places. It's really, really easy to get in touch with us.
Cool. Well, Frank, it's been an absolute pleasure. Part 2 has definitely lived up to the expectations of part 1. I think this time we've got into more detail and more specific in terms of focused on those people that need to hear this. I think the prior conversation was all about, digging into the technology and helping those that are in the voice kind of community understand the speech to intent and stuff like that. But I think this one has been a lot more practical from the practitioner's perspective, from helping people understand what the actual value of this stuff is. And so really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for setting it up. I was privileged and honored to be here, and I hope everyone that came got something out of it for sure.
Cool. And we'll be back probably. I don't know if we've got one scheduled next week. It may be next week. It may be the week after. Dustin will be back as well, and we'll definitely take you up on the offer of returning with a practitioner, and we'll get it done. We'll do a part 2, which will take it on a step, which will be discussing a live implementation, which might be quite interesting.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks, Kate.
Cool. Cheers. Until next time.